It's time for policy discourse right now. Let's talk about illicit financial flows in Nigeria. This is a complex and pervasive problem that drains the Nigerian economy of resources that could have been used for developmental purposes. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria has tasked the banks to do more to ensure that they follow global standards to combat illicit $3 trillion funds flow. Now, globally, it is put that about $3 trillion, there's $3 trillion of illicit financial flows. And some of this pass through countries through different means because there are different aspects of illicit financial flows. To talk about this and look at the different aspects of illicit financial flows and how it impacts on the economy, we have Dotun Adekunle, who is a digital payment platforms expert, and he joins virtually this morning. Thank you, Dotun Adekunle, for joining the show.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Okay, let's talk about illicit financial flows. Now, when we hear illicit financial flow, what comes to mind could be money laundering and some other things, but it's deeper than that. Please take us through what actually is illicit financial flow.
All right, thank you so much. Illicit financial flows are a significant challenge to Nigeria's economic stability, to our development, to our financial integrity. It includes different types of transactions. It includes money laundering, terrorist financing, tax evasion, corrupt practices, bribery, corruption. So it's a whole lot, it's a wide gamut of different types of financial transactions or financial flows that happen within a country or across borders of different countries. There are always the monies that go under that try to go under the radar and are used for businesses that are not regulated or approved by the governments or the jurisdictions of the different countries wherein these activities take place. So it's a global problem, and Nigeria is not excluded from the challenges of illicit financial flows. If you look at Nigeria, there are flows that go outside that should have remained, those funds should have remained in Nigeria and been used for development. And there are also funds that come in from outside into Nigeria, and they typically don't go into investments, they go into terrorist financing and financing of weapons of mass destruction or things like that. So this is why there's a concerted effort by different agencies of government and the private sector to make sure that we're able to combat illicit financial flows in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dotun. In fact, I think you made a reference to one of the questions I want to ask. When I heard of the word illicit financial flow, I am more interested on the inflow. I'm more interested on the inflow because recently the chairman of the Economics and Financial Crimes Commission, Ulukwede, just, he gave back some money to some persons that were, duped by the fraudsters, 419ers, and the so-called Yahoo boys. Some of them are from Switzerland, some of them are from Spain, some of them are from the United States of America, and some of the monies that these young men collected from their victims, some of them were like $7,000, $2,000, $5,000, $7 million. And this is done, and the Spanish authorities, the Switzerland authorities, when they started praising the EFCC, they were talking about how this is going to go a long way in cooperation through the vehicle of Interpol to make sure that we have exchange of data and to facilitate the fighting and combating criminal activities in the country. But when some of our politicians, so when they mismanage and misappropriate funds, they take it out of this country. And this money serve as buffer for the economy of the countries that they take it to. Apart from terrorism, when we get this illicit financial flow into Nigeria, Is there any advantage for us when we get this money into the country?
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. Say, is that the efforts and the activities of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission is very, very commendable. There are movements to return some of the funds to the governments of Spain or Switzerland or the US of monies that have come in illegally through what we call Yahoo Yahoo or all the other avenues in which these monies have come in is really, really commendable. And it shows that Nigeria is on the right path and that we're really fighting and not accommodating or enabling these activities to go on unchallenged. We're trying to stem the tide. And I think that it will pay us in the long term because it will promote inter-government international collaboration with Nigeria as a good gesture because we have return funds. I think that would help to come to your second question, which is that when also Nigerians take funds outside of the country illegally, then foreign governments will also be very open to help us to repatriate those funds. What we have had in the past in Nigeria, especially we know the story of the Abacha loot, is that it takes years and years for these foreign government agencies or foreign governments to return the funds that have been illegally pulled out of Nigeria. And that's why we doing this helps to balance the equation and spur the other international community as a whole to make sure that they return the funds for us when they are illegally moved out. There are various avenues by which these funds are moved out today in Nigeria, whether it's corrupt politicians who are able to take funds and misappropriate them and move them out through various means, or whether it's organizations who are undervaluing or doing tax evasion and avoidance and doing all those things and moving these funds out to foreign countries. If we're able to cooperate better with foreign parties and foreign agencies, we can get these monies back and help to rebuild the Nigerian economy. The money that comes in from Yahoo Yahoo does not necessarily build the economy. Yes, they spend heavy when they come into Nigeria, but that eventually still goes back out and does not really help the GDP of Nigeria or our plight as an economy in the long run. So,
thank you very much. Now, I want to ask, what the Abacha loot, the Diziani loot, they spend a lot of time outside the country and they are in the banks in other countries. These monies are used for business purposes and it benefits that climate and that economy. How can we as a country do ours so that illicit financial inflows also serve as benefit to us before we repatriate them back to those other climes?
Well, it's about having the proper jurisdictions and the proper legal framework. If we don't have the proper legal framework, you will see, for instance, that those loots that we mentioned, the Tiziani loot or the Abacha loot, that those countries where these monies went to made sure that in returning the funds, they took their time before the funds were returned. Number two was that when the funds were returned, they had agreements and pacts with Nigeria to make sure that the funds do not get looted again, or that they are used for, they get into the right hands and they're used for purposes that serve the common man on the streets. And I think that Nigeria needs to build our own internal framework that when monies have come in illegally and we are able to investigate and learn or hold on onto these funds, we're able to keep those monies and retain them within the financial sector. As long as the monies remain within the financial sector, they remain within the banks for a certain period of time, that money will be served, will go around and be used for developing the Nigerian economy, while in no way are we supporting that there should be more and more illicit funds coming into the country, because that does not pay us in the long run. Today, Nigeria is on the
the grey list, for instance, and that's something that is bad for the economy as a whole, because it works against our ability to do business internationally. It works against local business in Nigeria interfacing with foreign companies. So it does not pay us. The best thing to do is to block these funds from coming in. We should not so much focus on how to use these funds to do business or spur our economy. But where they are in, we should keep them for a certain amount of time and have a proper framework for releasing the funds back to the companies and jurisdictions where they have come from.
Yeah, thank you so very much for being on the show this morning. I want to find out, do you think the anti-money laundering and financial intelligence mechanisms, for example, in Nigeria, are strong enough to actually deter people who are involved in this crime? And there's also the other dimension of people also looking for a way to clean up some of this illicit fund, and they enter into the country legally. How do we forestall some of all these practices?
All right, thank you very much. The frameworks for AML CFT needs to be strengthened in Nigeria. In the last 1 to 2 years, you'll see that this CBN, this current CBN, has been doing a lot of work in revising the regulatory framework for anti-money laundering. They have been doing a lot of work in ensuring that top financial organizations are doing better with their transaction monitoring systems. They're making sure that those top financial institutions are penalized when funds come into those organizations and they did not ask the proper questions. They did not do the customer due diligence. They did not have the KYC or the KYB of the businesses or the entities done in a proper way. They did not report suspicious transactions to the NFIU, and those things do not take place. So that has kind of shaken up the financial ecosystem, and everybody is now pro-compliance. Everybody wants to make sure that you're doing things in the way that it should be done so that you don't get penalized by the CBN. We've also seen increased efforts on the part of the EFCC in terms of collaboration with financial organizations, where today there are established relationships. There is a cybersecurity framework that has been established in partnership with the EFCC by a lot of organizations. We have the NCCC, that's the Nigerian Cyber Crime Center, a special division of the police that has been created and been empowered with tools for hacking, for detecting, for monitoring. CBN is, I know at present, is trying to release a new framework around the cybersecurity standards and transaction monitoring standards that has to be implemented by all financial organizations across the Nigerian financial ecosystem. These are some of the acts, the activities that are going on to strengthen the framework, strengthen the regulation, strengthen the monitoring, add technology to ensure that there's AI the detection of fraudulent activities or illicit financial activities going on within the systems of different financial organizations. So a lot of
now let's talk about the role of digital payment platforms in illicit financial flows. Now we have payment platforms, and we also have the crypto tradings ongoing, which the CBN has not really been in sync with because of how that could also be used to carry out illegal activities. What's your thoughts on crypto trading and digital payment platforms? What role do you think they play in either aiding or discouraging illicit financial flows?
All right, thank you very much. Digital payment systems have come to stay. They have been able to offer financial inclusion services that the traditional banks have not been able to offer. They've improved the GDP of Nigeria significantly. Lots of our youths are employed in these organizations, and we've seen better service, better delivery when we look at these new financial systems. Nonetheless, some of them have become loopholes that allow a lot of illicit funds to flow in or to flow within the Nigerian economy. And the CBN, of course, has cracked down on a number of agencies to, one, make sure that they comply with regulation and they are as monitored and regulated as the traditional financial institutions. So that's incursion of the CBN to put things in order has helped a long way. So you see that over the last 2 years, there's been improvement. And then the cooperations with the other regulatory agencies has also proved very, very helpful. But nonetheless, digital assets, which is crypto now, has become an area where most funds that are gotten in, that flow in illicitly or flow out illicitly, always come through crypto. Because these systems are not regulated, the advice that I have for the government is that instead of having that stance of we're not doing crypto in Nigeria, and people keep doing it underhanded and keep doing it on the dark web, it's time for regulatory authorities to actually embrace crypto technology, because there's nothing that we can do to stop it. But embrace it and license it and bring them into the total foray of financial transactions. That way, they're able to monitor transactions, ask for reports, and able to curb illicit flows, whether they are flowing in or flowing out. The way forward is to license and enable all these digital asset providers, especially the ones that deal with finance. Thank you.
All right, now if we're talking about the digital payment platforms too, let's look at tracking illicit financial flows and the cooperation of the banking system in having this done. Now, when the monies were returned to persons who were fallen victims to fraudsters outside of this country, it was applauded. At least we saw that they now have hope and trust in the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and what the Nigerian government is doing to discourage that. But internally, when events like this happen, someone notices that money has been moved from their account and they go over to the bank or need the cooperation of the banking sector. Sometimes it seems like it can be traced. You hear things like, oh, this transaction was done using POS. We can't track it, we can't trace it. Could you speak to that? Is it possible that any digital transaction, whether being carried out using POS or other means, cannot actually be tracked?
Again, thank you. The Nigerian payment ecosystem is one of the most advanced in the world. The Nigerian payment ecosystem is better in terms of efficiency, in terms of speed, than even what you have in the US, in the UK, and most parts of the world. And you find studies coming and going on from other international countries to come and study how come we're able to do transfers at the speed at which we are doing it. That, as much as it has been a blessing for trade and businesses, it has also become a problem, because it means that when fraud does occur, or when illicit funds flow into Nigeria, they are able to move at a speed that is unprecedented. And so when you have these kind of things happen in a particular organization, for instance, by the time you want to trace that transaction, it has moved to another organization in the financial ecosystem. By the time you get to that second organization, it has moved again to another financial institution, and eventually it moves to a POS where it turns to cash. At the point where a transaction turns from digital to cash is always the point where it becomes largely untraceable. But then there are regulatory frameworks that are being put in place by the regulators, CBN inclusive. One, to limit the amount of monies that can be cashed out at a POS agent. There is a new regulation, for instance, that no agent should do above 100,000 naira in any singular transaction, and that no agent should do above 1.2 million naira in total in terms of cash transactions, where digital or electronic money turns to cash transaction on a daily basis. These are some of the measures that will help to curb the system, because it's at the point where that digital to cash translation happens. That's where money becomes largely untraceable. And if at any point in time you are doing a transaction that is high in value, it is the responsibility of the POS agents to report and flag that transaction as a CTR, so that this is a currency transaction, so that it goes back into the ecosystem for for the monitoring organization to know that, hey, cash has happened here. If something goes and is suspicious, you can even demand as an agent that I need your ID, I need something from you to recognize that you are eligible for this transaction. These are some of the ways, and there's some of the ways, and there's a lot of awareness and advocacy that has to go into this, while not trying to prevent legitimate commerce from going on. Because we go to our markets, Nigeria is still a very heavily cash-based society, and until we fully transit into a full digital economy, we will not be able to fully cover. As far as there is cash, there is an opportunity, there's a loophole. But how do we just slow down cash and reduce the volume of cash transactions? Once we're able to do that, then we can always trace every fund that gets flowed.
Thank you so very much. Yeah, again, talking about advocacy, we also know that, like one of our former presidents once said, that if a protest go on in a street for more than 48 hours, some people's hand must be involved. And we know that a lot of people are complicit in this trade, whether they are security agents or some of them even people who are working in the corporate sectors, especially the financial services sector. These are motivations. How damaging is illicit financial flow to an economy, so that people who may be ignorant and participating will be better educated this morning?
It's extremely damaging. I mentioned a little bit before that Nigeria today is on the gray list. So for better understanding, that there is a white list, meaning that you can trade with these countries. There are gray lists, means that you have to be careful when you are trading with these countries. And there's blacklist, that countries you don't trade with, because there's so much terrorism going on, there's so much illicit flows going on in those countries. Because Nigeria is on the gray list, we are making certain investors who would have normally traded with Nigeria, who would have normally put money in Nigeria, to be chased away. So it's pure economic sabotage when we keep allowing these funds to flow in. It damages the lot of the common man on the street eventually. It damages the reputation of the economy. When we travel from place to place, there are countries that you go today that when you take your debit card and you want to use it in those countries, it will not hold, it will not work. Why? Because Nigeria is on the gray list and they are seen as a destination for illicit funds. There are places that you go today where, because of your green passport, you are subject to several scrutinization just because you come from Nigeria. All these things are damaging to the economy, to the rationale, to the people, to the prospect and the development of the nation that we are in. So it's really important for us to make sure that we stop it at the gate. We're not just allowing them to come in and then trying to investigate and capture those transactions and return the funds. Most important thing is to stop it from happening in the first place. That when they are coming in through crypto, through whichever way, we are blocking those transactions from happening. That the banks, the financial institutions are responsible to say, no, I'm not going to allow this transaction to flow because there is a suspicion. We should not allow the need for gain or to override national interest as we do our business as financial institutions.
Okay. How can adoption of technology like blockchain and artificial intelligence help to reduce the risk and danger of this illicit financial flow?
Yes. A number of organizations, including ours, have implemented artificial intelligence for fraud detection across the whole of our ecosystem. Today, when you are trying to do a transaction, we're able to stop that transaction to say, are you sure you want to do this transaction? Are you sure that the destination of this transaction is somebody that you really want to move for? We have noticed, for instance, that this destination has been flagged before by several agencies as a place or as a destination account for fraudulent activities. Are you sure you want to make this happen? Now, authorize this with your face and things like that. So AI can go a long way to just trace and identify both real-time and post-mortem places and accounts that are fraudulent. In the same way, blockchain gives that non-repudiation, where you can trace every single transaction, and you cannot reverse the transaction. You cannot take it back. The digital record exists and exists permanently, and it exists not in a central location, but it's decentralized. So you cannot go and delete it in several places. So that helps to implementation of blockchain technologies can help to make sure that financial activities are traceable, they are trackable, they can be investigated, they can be audited. And I know that some of the new systems that are being built for our the National Central Switchboard for Nigeria are embracing some of these technologies so that going forward would have traceable financial transactions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dotun Adekunle. Now, the Bureau de Change, the BDCs, have been fingered in some way to, been sponsoring terrorism sometime in Nigeria. And the United States of America sanctioned about 6 Nigerians in the United Arab Emirates for setting up cells and raising funds through the BDCs to sponsor terrorism. Do you think the financial regulatory authorities have the wherewithal to monitor this through the BDCs to detect the flow of funds and for what purpose it's been used for?
The challenge that we have with the BDCs today is that they are not digital. The BDCs operate a manual process where they have the license to buy FX and to trade in FX, and that those things, because things are not digital, they can happen off the record, and so it becomes easy for them to, some of them who have been licensed, to then get funds legally, but then trade it illegally and then use it to finance terrorism and things like that. So the new framework, we've seen that a number of BDC licenses were withdrawn in the last 1 to 2 years. I think that the CBN needs to, and the other regulation needs to go to a point where basically all BDCs need to be re-licensed and have to do things in a digital manner so that it is trackable and we know who you are sending funds to. Today, people just write anything. I mean, you go to a BDC and you want to buy FX, you just write your name. You could have written any name, you can have written any, you can put any ID card. That is just a big loophole that allows a lot of things to go on that are untrackable and undetected. And until we correct that anomaly, the menace will continue. The BDCs have to be restructured. There has to be an electronic method to make sure that these things are done. I know CBN has done something about having something about an EBDC before now, but I've not seen that, has not really seen the light of day. And with the number of licenses, I think the number of licenses of BDCs are also too much. And that needs to be restricted to a more, the same, because they are financial institutions in some vein, the same kind of regulatory oversight that is given to banks and other fintechs, MMOs, PSBs, that same level of regulatory oversight needs to be put on the BDCs. Today, it's not there, and it needs to change.
When we talk about illicit financial flows, most of it comes from illicit trade. Now, are there sectors of the Nigerian economy that are more exposed, more prone for illicit financial flows to happen there? Let's take a look at the mining sector in Nigeria, which is not as organized as it should be. And there's a lot of artisanal mining ongoing there. Could that be one area to point such light on and really look at the activities there? And are there other sectors of the economy that we need to do same for?
I mean, you're spot on. Wherever there is disorganization and there is chaos, there is opportunity for illegal transactions to go on there. And the mining sector and solid mineral sector as a whole has been one area that has been fingered for this. Today, the way we have the oil sector very regulated, we have the core financial sector very regulated. We do not have the solid mineral sector very regulated. And we have pockets of mining companies, mining agencies who are tapping into our solid minerals and cutting away with them or trading these minerals without proper documentation, without proper alignment. And all of these are happening all around different sectors or different places within Nigeria. Again, I know that this administration has been making some effort to try and organize and bring this into some kind of framework. But I think that it is still too slow, in my opinion. and that a whole lot of work needs to be done to accelerate the onboarding of all these mining agencies, and to create a framework additionally for things to be reported, so that the government can be aware of what is going on in several places within the sector. But yes, the mining sector is an area that we fingered for allowing a lot of these activities to go on.
If you were to be made the CBN governor today, in specific terms, what things will you have put in place to ensure that this illicit trade ends?
I wish I was CBN governor, but I think that there are a number of things that needs to be considered. Number one will be to strengthen regulatory framework, and that strengthening regulatory framework will involve that there is interagency cooperation. So the CBN, the EFCC, the NFI, the FIRS, the Security and Exchange Commission, all these agencies have to be able to work together, have committees that are agency agnostic, that are able to deal with these issues. Part of the problem for Nigeria is that one agency is chasing it, another agency is chasing from another angle, and these bad actors know that there is no collaboration, and that's why these things have prolonged. Number two is to enhance or strengthen our financial surveillance. KYC and CDD, KYC and customer due diligence has to be strengthened across all financial transactions. We'll be strengthening your customer, we improve reporting systems, and we monitor crypto transactions. Number three will be in the area of combating trade-based money laundering. The customs has to be involved in knowing what is happening, and then we tighten cross-border cooperation, or we improve cross-border cooperation, so that when monies are moving across the border from country to country, we're knowing exactly what is going on, what is the purpose of the transaction, which agency here and which agency there is receiving the funds, which businesses are they qualified businesses. So inter-government collaboration is also very important. Of course, we already discussed today that the CBN has to push that we have to leverage technology and fintech solutions. Blockchain has to be embraced, crypto has to be embraced and licensed, AI has to be used, digital identity systems have to be strengthened. The BVN and NIN have gone a long way, but I think it should still be further strengthened, and it should become the de facto method for any financial account to be opened. That means we know your identity before you can do anything. That's why you have in the other countries, other jurisdictions, you can't get away scot-free with any illicit activity, because you are tracked. Everything is tracked, and BVN and NIN stand as a basis for that. Then finally is the advocacy that we talked about. The CBN has to do a lot of work in the advocacy by doing the National Orientation Agency, doing a lot of work on what is Yahoo Yahoo, what is all those other activities, how are funds getting in illegally, how are funds going out illegally, what are these things that are happening. Let the common man on the street understand the nature of these things. And these are some of the things that I feel that I will do if I was a CBN governor too.
All right, just to follow up on that, you talked about knowing the identity of those who are account holders on different platforms. Now, whether it's fintech or it's the conventional bank, we've seen a trend where for some digital platforms, all you need to open an account with them is your phone number. Any name can be given. You see very funny names on some digital platforms. I would not want to mention their names. Now, ordinarily, because the name, national identity number, is attached to phone numbers, that should be enough security. But we'll also see a situation where some names are mismatched with the SIM numbers. So how does that guarantee security when the know your customer procedure is not fully followed?
All right. Once there's a failure at the point of entry, at the point of onboarding, it opens up a lot of risks for that account. It can be used for anything. And so in the past, the CBN's regulation had allowed that just with a name and a number, you could open an account. So that was by regulation. But then over the years, while financial inclusion grew and grew at the rate at which CBN wanted it to go, so also fraud grew. And that loophole of just your name and your number being the requirement became something that was no longer feasible. And it became important, therefore, that the only point of entry onboarding should be your NIN or BVN. Today, that is now a regulation. For some organizations, we've gone a step further to make sure that even for tier 1 accounts, you have to have an NIN or BVN before you can start. But coming to your second question is that now that depends on the authenticity, on the security of the NIN and BVN databases. Because if you then register with a NIN, that NIN can be maybe subject to security breaches, then it opens up the door. So I think that the digital assets of the NIN and BVN, digital identity assets of the NIN and BVN needs to be protected further and strengthened in such a way that there are no duplicates, and that there is no way that anybody can use those things without the consent of the owner. I know for the BVN, the NIBS introduced something called I Agree last year or 2 years ago, where even if your BVN is going to be used by somebody else to register on the platform, there has to be an OTP or some kind of authenticator that has to come to the original holder, who then has to enter that OTP before that BVN or NIN can be used to open an account. What we have done in my organization is to go a step further to say that NIN or BVN, even though you get an OTP that comes to you authenticate that OTP, we still want to use your facial verification. So we're checking the image that is provided by the NIN or BVN, and we're comparing with the live image that you have today as you take a picture of yourself. If the face does not match, you cannot be onboarded. And CBN needs to then put that as a law so that all organizations follow the same standard, and then we should be on a good ground.
All right, thank you very much. Now, let me cast your mind back a little bit. During the cash redesign policy, we saw how the CBN that served as the regulatory authority for the banks, the commercial banks, sort of lacked the muscle to really hold the banks to the laws and to the rules concerning cash disposal during that period in time. Most of the commercial banks flouted the CBN authority with regards to instructions on how to give out cash. Do you think we have moved away from that platform where the commercial banks now are really, under the supervisory authority and the regulatory powers of the CBN, where its instructions are carried out without any form of defiance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I mentioned and I hinted at the beginning that you will see that the current CBN administration has been much tougher on compliance and regulations than previous administrations. The amount of penalties that a lot of banks and fintechs have suffered in the last 1 to 2 years have been significantly higher than the amount they will get before. So these have become deterrents to financial institutions to not comply with any directive or any guideline or any framework that has come from the CBN. I also think that when regulations and guidelines are put out, it's important that the institutions are also able to carry out those guidelines or enforce those guidelines, because sometimes when those instructions come, the banks themselves are not strong enough or do not have the power to enforce some of the things that have been directed by the CBN. And once they can't do that, you then see this flouting, because it's literally not possible to fulfill those rules. But I think that as a whole, between 2022 and now, there has been a lot of progress. There's more cash in the economy that has been printed. There's more digital awareness. COVID has helped us to be comfortable with digital transactions. And so the new policies and guidelines are coming out. People are more empowered. Organizations are more empowered to fulfill these rules without having to get into being penalized by the CBN. But the CBN is stronger. This current CBN is stronger than it used to be.
All right, so on the path of the general public, what are some things they should know, some tips you would like to give? Because when financial crimes is being investigated, you find people who have become complicit, sometimes unknowingly.
Yes, so I think that the first thing is that if you get an inflow into your account that you were not expecting, that you were not anticipating, the first thing is that make sure that you report. Secondly, is that where your account is to be, you should be careful of who you are transferring to, where you have to do any transactions that are going out of your account, because you can become complicit if you send transactions to an unknown number. Where you get calls or unsolicited messages from purported persons representing your organization, you need to double check and be sure that that is really coming from those organizations. Go through the regular channels and don't fall for the greed that is purported in investment scams or investment schemes that are promising you will earn so much interest by joining this scheme. Once you take these things, and don't share your personal identifying information with anybody for any reason, no matter what. If you take these steps and keep them to heart, I'm sure that most Nigerians will be fine.
Okay, finally from my side, do you think that we have enough deterrence in the system to actually deter people from participating? And recently too, we also saw moving on the social media, people accusing some certain banks in Nigeria opening accounts for them without their notice. How do we check all of this and ensure that people take consequences for those bad behaviors?
Yeah, so what you have is that, first of all, sometimes on social media, what you have is not as sometimes not as truthful as it appears to be, and needs to be double checked to ensure that that is truly the case. In cases where this information is correct, the deterrence and penalties that have been specified by the regulatory authorities are quite strong enough. When investigated, anyone found guilty in any way will go ahead and face the penalties of their actions. Thirdly, is that we need to strengthen our national identity databases. We've had cases of authenticated BVNs and NINs that do not belong to the real person that is purported by the BVN or the NIN. So there are those cases, but I know that the authorities are also on this, trying to make sure that the loophole of onboarding people into the BVN ecosystem and to the NIN system are also watertight to make sure that you don't have the wrong people coming.
Well, thank you so much, Dotun Adekunle, who has a strong background with having worked with digital payment gateways and payment platforms. So he's a fintech expert, bringing all his knowledge and expertise to bear, as we've discussed, tackling illicit financial flows in Nigeria. We thank you so much for the wonderful insights you provided on the conversation today.
Thank you very much.